Have you noticed when you're watching BookTube, as I have, some BookTubers throw around literary terms willy-nilly and others really love to show off their ability to remember the offering from the word of the day calendar they saw that morning and squeeze big fancy words into sentences even when they don't really belong? You know who you are. It got me thinking about all kinds of terms and words we use on BookTube every day, and if we use them correctly or if the meanings have changed very much over the years, or even perhaps if there is more than one meaning to something. I thought we'd start with, what is romance? When I say romance, most of you probably think of stories of romantic love, but it wasn't always this way. It only really occurred to me recently when I was reading some writings by the likes of H. Rider Haggard or John Buchan or et al., and they refer to their stories as romances. And I was saying to myself, hang on a second, Mark, there are no love interests in this book. There are no women, even sometimes, or male love interests, or whatever. There just isn't any romance in this book. I've heard the expression used before in this way, but I never really thought about it until now. So I decided to look it up and see what's behind it all. And this is what I found out. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Book Time with Elvis with me, Mark. And today we're going to talk about the meanings of romance. The OED gives two main definitions of romance when related to literature. The first is a fictitious narrative, usually in prose, in which the settings or the events depicted are remote from everyday life, or in which sensational or exciting events or adventures form the central theme, a book, etc., containing such a narrative, now chiefly archaic and historical. A story of romantic love, especially one which deals with love in a sentimental or idealized way, a book, film, etc., with a narrative or story of this kind, would be the second meaning. Before romance was used to indicate the concept of love, it was used in French to indicate a verse narrative, a story, if you will. You can see the word is of Latin origin, the word being, of course, Romanicus, meaning of the Roman style. Prior to the 17th century, romances encompassed stories, tales, epics, and ballads, all that kind of thing, which fell under the umbrella of chivalric adventure. There was little to no love in these stories at all, certainly no romance as we think of it today. Even with the appearance of love romances from the 17th century, the older concept of romance persisted alongside the new right up to the early years of the 20th century, and then poof, it practically disappears. No one today would describe The Lord of the Rings as a romance, which it really is. We can see the name used, for example, in the Chinese classic Romance of the Three Kingdoms by Lu Guanzhong. But to a modern audience, this may suggest a love story, which is not the case, at least not in the way we imagine it. To look for definitions of the older use of romance, we can look to Sir Walter Scott, who very kindly defined it for us as a fictitious narrative in prose or verse, the interest of which turns upon marvellous and uncommon incidents. Often works we term today as historical fiction would be termed romances back then. Adventure fiction, nautical fiction, fantasy stories all could have fallen under the blanket, if you like, of romance. But what about works we consider to be the only real form of romance today? For example, Jane Austen's writings or the Bronte sisters. Well, these were termed love romances because they are romance novels that deal with love as opposed to romances that deal in adventure or historical stories, that kind of thing. You know, once again, the Oxford English Dictionary tells us the original use for romance in English, that's the key point, when applied to literary fiction is now chiefly archaic and historical. It's gone, confined to oblivion, almost. And when we use romance today, it mainly, almost exclusively, refers to genre fiction love stories, romances. Nathaniel Hawthorne was another one who decided to define the idea of romance, and he said it is radically different from a novel by not being concerned with the possible or probable course of ordinary experience. It certainly covers a wide area of literature when you look at it like that. We hear the terms romance languages to describe those of Latin origin. It doesn't, of course, mean that those languages are necessarily romantic. It just so happens that they are. Most people look at French or Italian as being far sexier, far more romantic than Germanic languages such as German or English even. Other countries have not so easily forgotten the real origin of romance. We see it in German and we see it also in Czech, which are languages, of course, not from the Romance family. And the word roman means novel. It means novel, book, story. And we don't use roman in English to describe that. We have, however, adopted in from the German the term Bildungsroman, a novel dealing with a person's formative years, and the Roman part, of course, of that means novel. So, although the wider use of the original term of romance has fallen out of favour, it lurks in the background and whispers a gentle reminder to us now and then, which, personally, I think is rather romantic. Thank you so much for watching. Do take care, everybody, and see you all again soon. Bye-bye.
Da da da